Hello and welcome to episode 119 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Suzie. I am your host and I'm an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner. Today I am sharing with you all a beautiful episode that I had with Angela Bolton of The Love of One. I will of course put all of her details in the show notes so that you can go and connect with her. You can go and check her podcast out over on YouTube, where I was a guest probably about a year ago now. But Angela is a beautiful soul who I worked with a few years ago when she was going through some changes and some redirections. And the work that she is now doing is real proof of alignment to purpose. You'll hear about Angela's story, you'll hear about her work with the Sophia stream, and you'll also hear about the energy healing work that she does, the Oversoul, and everything that she's doing with clients. So I'm really excited to introduce you all to Angela, to her work, and I of course will see you next time for the next episode. Welcome, Angela, to the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. I am so grateful that you are here. Angela had me on her podcast probably about a year ago now, and it's taken us that long to sit down and do this reciprocal episode, but I'm really pleased that you're here, and I can't wait for you to share the beautiful work that you're doing with the listeners. So, Angela, welcome. And if you want to get started with, first of all, let's tell the listeners how you and I met, how our paths crossed.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here and chat with you today about whatever comes up. But first, we met, I was referred to you by a different spiritual teacher at the time, years ago, to talk about Akashic Records because I was having these reoccurring dreams. I was going through a lot of what I thought and think of as ancestral back then. So it was really the very beginning stages of my big push to awakening to who I am and my mission and service. And so I got on your calendar, waited patiently to sit with you. Then when we finally connected, I was just so blown away by the information that was just coming through without me even really saying anything, and how you connected so easily with the guides and the records. And it just really, in that very first session, I think we've had 2 or 3 sessions together since, but that first session really just, I don't know, just sparked something in me that was like, oh, these are amazing. And then also that reoccurring dream stopped as soon as we had that session. So brought light to it. And then that was really a turning point. That first session with you, quite honestly, when I look back at it, is a huge turning point in my evolution since. So thank you for that, which also leads me to believe that anything and everything we do along our journey sparks something in us to go to the next, to go to the next, to go to the next.
I love your story because I love the fact that I think sometimes people think an Akashic reading is just about getting information, but it's about activations. And I know a big part of your work is activation. So I'd love you to talk through, if you don't mind, for the listeners who maybe have never heard that term before, what activations are and how they work and how they help you to really connect to that internal technology that we all have.
Yeah, sure. So activation is what I've come to understand in my embodiment practice over the last 5 years in particular, is that you can pick up activations from just about anything. And so my podcast that you were on, as well as a guest, is Love of One podcast. And the whole purpose about the podcast was different modalities that I tried on my own journey and realized that each one served a different activation point along my own personal journey. And so I wanted to share that with everybody because I've also come to realize that it's not a one size fits all. Not everybody's plant medicine. Not everyone could do hypnotherapy. Not everyone understands the records. But it also comes down to different books that you read, right? So even different books that you do, or aha moments, or something that someone says in a synchronicity has this activation to you. And what I see that is as it's something that your body also recognizes, right? So your heart can recognize it. You can get goosebumps. You can get a tingling in your body. You can get like chest, your heartbeat in the center of your chest, not where your heart is, starts to race, or you get really excited for whatever reason. Oh my gosh. Or if you're reading a book and something sparks, it's really like an activation is occurring. And when you're like, oh my gosh, I can't put this book down. Why do I feel like I'm the main character all of a sudden? Like that, those are what activations are. And what it is activating memories. They're activating your own
Yes.
memories of your own world, of your own soul, of your own soul's growth, of your own like Oversoul. So what I've come to understand is that my personal work here as my soul contract is literally assisting people in activating, embodying, and integrating their Oversoul into their human body, which has been quite the experience. And that
Yeah.
I find myself often tapping into the records for myself, for people that I sit with, for channeling. And channeling to me is just that, is accessing the records.
Yeah, I love that. Can you share with the listeners as much or as little as you want about your spiritual journey? So, where did it begin? How did it transpire? I know spiritual journeys aren't always the most pleasant.
Yeah, I think that if people start to listen through the podcast, all the episodes, I'm everything but very vulnerable and very honest and open about my journey because I feel like the more people can be open, especially women too, could be more open, it allows others to feel like they too can be open and that they are not alone. And I kept through my journey started when I was little, of course, as we all do. But I've come to realize throughout my journey of healing and bringing these wounds to the surface and entering the records, I was able to see when they got shut down. So I was able to unlock what I shut down, when I shut it down. And so that's really helped me in this stage of my life to see the bigger picture and to see all these different perspectives. And
Mhm.
so my journey has not been easy at all. I would feel like anything that anyone could think of that someone would have to move through, I've moved through it. And maybe not in its purest, longest form, but I've definitely touched in with it, like cancer and death of a mother, of being a caretaker, of suicide or attempted suicide, to divorces and narcissistic mental abuse, to losing everything during a dark night of the soul, down to nothing and having to rebuild your life back up, to being a single mother, to the corporate world of a woman trying to knock down the ceiling, and financial technology software and corporate world is enough to be like, okay, I'm done as a human, right? So I've moved through all of these. And then I think what it really came down to the day, Suzie, was the courage and the desire to want to heal, the desire to want to understand myself, the desire to understand what love truly is. That was the deepest wound I had to discover was abandonment on every level.
Mm.
And to be seen, and because of all the abandonment, I have this huge wound of being seen throughout all of my lifetimes. In fact, my whole soul, its oversoul has always been about I'm not seen. And how do I see? How can I be seen? Not see me, I'm fabulous, I'm a celebrity, just seen in all the things that represent ourselves, especially love. And so my journey has been quite the roller coaster. And I've reached out to many allies along my journey of plant medicine journeys, a lot of those in a gentle space, all different kinds. Hypnotherapy has been one of my most favorite, actually, more gentle, but really can dive into different aspects of yourself and your oversoul. And the Akashic Records have been a huge help along my entire journey. And then I've also noticed with the Akashic Records, which I'm interested on your take. So in past lives, I've seen myself in and out as Ma'at, this goddess energy, right? And in and out with thought and moving along of planting and growing seeds within the human avatar and earth as we all do. But also, like, I've been able to see different aspects of the records. Like, many times I go into the records expecting what I usually see, like this big door swings open for me etherically, and I see like the rows of scrolls, and the sky is open and the stars, and I can see geometric patterns everywhere. But lately, when I try to access, I get immediately taken to the halls of Amonte, which is interesting to me. And that's a completely different aspect, I think, of the Akashic field. So I think that there's different layers of the
Oh, yeah.
records. And as you evolve and open yourself and clear those wounds and become lighter in density, I think that you start to access these other aspects to go even deeper, to dive deeper into understanding not just who we are or who I am, but what everything is. And I think that's the beautiful part of going within and following your self journey to discovery.
For sure. And the Akashic Records, I think, sometimes gets confused because a lot of people do have that experience that you talk about, the going into a library, the seeing the scrolls. And I will always say the Akashic Records are not a library in the fifth dimension. And I say it not to dismiss that experience that people have, because that's a valid experience. What I'm saying it for is they're not just that.
Yeah.
It's this beautiful multidimensional field. And if you can open and expand your awareness to it being that, then what you're not doing is you're not limiting yourself to that one experience. If you just
Yeah.
go in and say, it's going to be how it's going to be today, and I'm going to go to the right aspect and the right part of the Akashic Records that I need to today for me right now, depending upon the information that I need or what healing I need to receive, then it keeps us a lot more open, because one of the things that really hinders people in their work with the records is having a preconceived idea about how it should be. Whereas I'm always trying to break that open and say, no, this is a multidimensional field. The experiences that certainly my students have relayed to me, everybody's different in what they'll experience. There can be similarities, and those can be really helpful for people to hear, but it's about being really curious and allowing the experience to be what it is. And it's hard because then it means that trusting what you're receiving. And of course, the ego doesn't want you to trust anything. The ego wants you to
That's so
feel
true.
like you're separate and all of that. But it's absolutely true that there are many different layers to it. And I am constantly learning. I say all of the time, I don't really know anything about the Akashic Records. And I don't say that as in my experience is not valuable. It absolutely is. But I'm constantly being shown new. I'm constantly being taken deeper and higher and more into different levels of the records. And that to me is one of the reasons that I love working with them, because it means that I'm never going to get bored.
Yes.
No day is the same. No Akashic Records experience is the same. So I love that you're getting to experience that, because it does mean, okay, now you're accessing these new levels of information, and it's a beautiful thing. And that will be new information that comes into service of humanity. I'd
Uh-huh.
love you to share, if you don't mind, the work that you do with clients, because I know you are all about the embodiment, one of my favorite things. I know you're all about the feminine, the Sophia. So if you want to tell the listeners a bit about what the Sophia is to you and the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you. So along this journey too, I've come to understand that everything that I've moved through, so my journey of awakening and coming into understanding my truest purpose, I have this fated path, if you will, in my astrology too. That's every time I try to go off script or off path, I get jerked right back on. And I do believe with embodiment itself, it's really what you've lived, and that allowing your body, your actual body, to come along with the ride with you, right? So what I've also come to understand through my own process is that I would go and do these amazing things, these amazing modalities, and cut through the layers of my onion and everything. But when I would sit with myself and understand, my body wasn't with me. So my
Mm.
mind and my soul may have been like, yeah, we're along for this ride. We've closed the door, we're on to the next and on to the next. But what was happening was my body was not. And so my
Right.
body was like, I'm not with you. I'm still hurting here. I haven't had time to integrate, which I think that is a big thing that I see happening a lot with people that are going into these intense modalities like plant medicine journeys, and even with psilocybin, and even with hypnosis and all these things that they're going through, and and they don't have pure integration and embodiment path with them. And so what happens is people get overwhelmed and then they stop living what they learned. They don't take any action forward, or they sit in solitude a lot into their own mind and process. And sometimes they really disconnect, right? What I've also seen is I'm a huge pattern gal. I like to see data patterns in everything I do. And this is no different. This is really showing me that I am here walking the feminine path, and not just for women, but for men as well. In fact, a lot of my clients are men who are trying to come into their feminine aspect, because we cannot keep evolving as a soul unless we're truly balanced in both aspects of feminine and masculine.
Absolutely.
And so I think that one of my very first sessions when I came to you, you said, you have to get, Angie, you have to get back into your feminine. And I was like, but Susie, I wear dresses. I make up hair. What are you talking about? You're like, no, silly, that's not. That was my first. I will always remember that conversation with you, because it was really like mind blowing. Oh my God, I know what she's talking about now. Okay. Ding, like a big light bulb. And so this whole path, I've been understanding that I've truly connected with the feminine divine on a very large aspect. And I'm here to embody it. In fact, one of my very first ayahuasca experiences, which was fantastic, but also very painful, very real. very emotional. It was all about my mother and her ancestral wounding that she went to the grave with. And I physically had a physical experience under that medicine of going through exactly what happened to her. And it was intense and it was emotional. And then I literally expelled the bloodline of my whole family of her side during that experience. And so you have to sit with that and think, what did I learn from that? And how can I move forward with that information and that feeling and that experience? And how can I embody that to bring into the world? And so since that experience in 23, every experience thereafter has been very similar in nature to the divine feminine.
Mm.
My channeling has come on, and that's why I say channeling is really just tapping into the records with other beings and other frequencies. And it's almost, oh, I'm going to hit onto this frequency today, and I'm going to hit on this frequency, and I'm going to get to these records today, and in and out. And that's so amazing. And don't know, is you just start to see things completely different and separate, but the same, right? Just different perspectives that all leave you down the same path and road. And so through this process, I've started to connect. So it's the way it was explained to me in many sessions in the records and hypnotherapy also, I think, is just your subconscious tapping into the records too. So the records are all around us in every aspect, I believe, of any modality that anyone goes down. That's why it's important to understand what they truly are. With that being said, it's been since 2012 since my body has been taking this enjoyment process of truly embodying this higher dimensional frequency of which I now carry. That's why I'm always stuffed up because I'm always taking in this energy through this high vibration and I'm alchemizing it through my third eye. And so it's always like stuffy here. And so I'm still working with that piece of me. But with that, Sophia energy is the divine feminine of all that is. So if you think of source being the circle and the dot and the circle, she is one of the very first pieces of that dot that represents the divine feminine aspect, where some can argue and say too that Thoth, his aspect and his oversoul is the divine masculine piece that brings in the balance. So you have source and then it goes down to the divine feminine and masculine. And so, what that is that it represents everything that brings us into our feminine side and in our soft side, into the divine, into the connection of one. And what she really does is anchors everything to the heart center. And
Mm.
so, my awakening process has been embodying, experiencing every aspect of the heart, which, if you could imagine, has been very intense to understand everything that gets stuck and muddled and buried in our heart centers as humanity from a collective, personal, ancestral, and planetary aspect. It's a lot. And so I now embody that. I've been working with very many, a lot of guides and my higher self and my oversoul to accompany this. And how I bring it forward is there are three aspects of the oversoul: embodiment and integration. And when we talk about the oversoul, we're talking about those that have worked enough to connect to their higher self. So it's the true soul evolution of the next phase. We were working on to get to our higher self, and now a lot of us are getting there. And now we're going to the next phase, which is the oversoul. And it accompanies the heart, the throat to speak our truth, and our womb to bring that creative aspect of bringing things out into the world, which is truly the divine feminine aspect of
Mm.
our soul. And so through light language, I connect to different frequencies of different ancestors. All different kinds come through me whenever is needed. So I literally mirror, I just work in the mirroring field. So I mirror the other person who sits with me in a group or individual. And we sit there and we mirror each other. And I listen, I connect to the Sophia, and she channels through me. I'm just a conduit. So my body is the energetic conduit of what is needed for that person in that moment to bring in their embodiment, to integrate. And so I see geometry. I literally see geometry coming through the field and the records of what needs to be replaced, repaired, settled, moved, changed, whatever. And I could literally see it come through the hands in the energetic field of the golden light of
Mm.
Sophia to be placed into their body. And a lot of people feel it. Some people they feel it, or they have emotions come through. Some people have said that they can see and feel her hands because they see her hands. They're usually over a person with this big golden light and they open up. Her hands literally open up and it just comes through. And my hands are doing their own thing. And it's kind of like this hand is a voodoo doll, the receiving hand, and of the person. So I'm mirroring their body here. And then she comes through this and then clears it. And so on my hand, the center, the middle finger is the neck, the head, the third eye. The other two are the hands, and then these are the feet, and then this is the body. And we kind of work through that, and I can feel it moving, and I can see it in my third eye when my eyes are closed. So it's a really beautiful aspect getting to the next evolutionary phase. Some people say it's like a plant medicine journey, but without the medicine, because we are the medicine together as we mirror one another. And so it's beautiful. And oversoul integration isn't a one and done thing. It's continuing, but it's also happens is I receive geometry specific to their own avatar body. It's like their oversoul's geometry and a mantra that they sit with and utilize. And so they have their own homework, which you can't spiritually bypass the oversoul. So,
No.
which I think is beautiful. You just can't. Yeah. But when they work with it, they see real results and they could go to the next level and things start to heal in their body and things start to function better. And they start to bring in their awareness and more of their own memories from an oversoul perspective, which is beyond the higher self.
I love that. No, I think it's brilliant. And what are the typical problems or issues that someone comes to you with? Because from what you're telling me, that these are going to be people who they've been on their spiritual journey for quite some time. They've done some work on connecting to and embodying that higher self and understanding that they are so much more than just this physical body, which is very important. And we don't want to ignore it on our spiritual journey in any way, shape, or form. Talk to me about the types of people that you see, the types of issues that you help people with.
Yeah, it's definitely people that have already been on their path for a while, and maybe they're stuck. Maybe they don't understand how to get rid of these last kind of things. Like ancestral wounding is a really big one that I'm working with, where I can clear bloodlines through the access point of Sophia. And we can clear that. It's usually in the heart center. So a lot of people, when they're trying to get their heart open and more coherence through their heart, we definitely connect straight to the heart and move anything. So I'll see a lot of like dust or tidbits or ancestral patterning that's still stuck in there, like grieving and things like that. And so we'll move a lot of the grief out of the way, and a lot of the shame or guilt is also seems to be stuck there a lot that we move through. And then also different parts of their body where energy is still stagnant and stuck, and they don't know how to move through that. So people come if they know that their heart's not completely open. Like people, if you've already been on your journey and you've already connected to your higher self, you already know intuitively that something is just not right. Something is being can't just move. And so it's that, or if people want more embodiment, like they don't understand the key concept of embodiment. You know, my journey itself has always been like, explain it to me in the most simplest 12-year-old term, right? I want to know what this really means throughout my whole journey. And so when you dive in, it's really what I've understand, Suzie, is that everything wants to be seen and heard. So it goes back to my biggest wound, which I also have Chiron in my 12th house of Aries, which is like right next to Black Moon Lilith, which is all about collective awareness and healing and all these different higher intense things. And it's really everything wants to be seen, everything to your body, to your nervous system, to your cells, your molecular structure, to your DNA. So when you said the body is just as important, yes. And I think that's also what we are forgetting. So anyone
Mm,
who also feels like I've been doing all this, but I feel like we're not making progress, then they
mm,
come to me and then we work through that piece of let's get back into the body. Let's open the heart. Let's get your nervous system flowing like warm honey milk, is how I see it, and have you feel that. So we also bring in a lot of unconditional love and nervous system settlement, that
mm.
feeling, so they could truly feel it and sit in it for a while with the Divine Mother, so that they can always remember that's how it's supposed to be, and that they can
Yes.
always go back to that feeling on their own after we connect to always remind themselves that, yes, my body also needs to be seen, and I can see it from the inside out if I truly sit with it and I know how to do that. And so that's what we bring forth.
Yeah, it sounds like very empowering work for someone to be able to go through that and to feel all of that. And I think one of the key aspects of the divine feminine, certainly that I've learned in my journey with them, because I was like you, very disconnected from the divine feminine
Mhm.
in my earlier days, is it's all about the body and the wisdom of the body and paying attention to what the body is telling you. And I think there can be so much emphasis in the spiritual community online, especially, of transcending the body, leaving the body, having these out of body experiences. And don't get me wrong, having experiences in higher dimensions is amazing. And all of these things are beautiful. But as you beautifully said earlier, what are you doing with it when you're back in? What are you
Yeah.
doing with it when you're coming into your day-to-day life? You can have this beautiful, blissful experience of being in oneness and being connected to unconditional love. And I have had many of those experiences, and I hope to have many more. But it's then, am I bringing that back into my daily life when I'm interacting with people every day? Am I bringing that back into my parenting? How am I showing up in the world? And that's what
Yes.
embodiment is. It's not something separate to these beautiful
Right.
spiritual experiences. It's taking that knowledge gained in those beautiful spiritual experiences and turning it into wisdom. I always say the body is what
Yeah.
turns out the knowledge into wisdom. And it then makes it a lived experiential thing, which we need more of in this day and age when we're also in our heads and distracted and attention's going everywhere. Slowing down, connecting into the body and being embodied, I think is just going to become more and more important as time goes on.
Yeah, and that was my biggest last lesson was really not last because we're always learning, but one of my biggest lessons of embodiment was I loved all those experiences too. If you'll see my podcast, there's so many out there and then some that aren't out there. And I was a very big devotee to my path. Every week I would do something for years. And I loved that space. But then I started to realize, but I'm supposed to be here living that space and bringing it forward. And I think one of the beautiful things that I keep going back to is we're here to ascend so that our oversoul can then descend back. So we're all talking about ascension and ascending up and into the clouds and whatever, but the whole purpose is to get there so that we can bring and descend our truest self back into this reality to settle into this form and into this beautiful body that is one of the most special things about the human species is its beautiful body and its brain and how everything is working. That's one of the most beautiful, unique aspects of a human species that we have. And so one of the biggest collective, I believe, this is what Sophia is saying now, one of the biggest collective things that we are here to experience together is truly that. How do we bring our actual unforgettable higher wisdom selves into this body to live this experience on this beautiful planet who seeds all the rest of the universe, right? So that is truly our collective goal is how do we bring the heaven to earth together in this physical form that makes us unique and still survive in these high vibrations? And that's really truly what I'm here to help pioneer into the collective.
I love that. And that's what I talk about on the podcast, the building of the light body. It's what we're here to do, but you can't do that without the body.
You have to have this relationship with your body. And it's been such a challenge for me, but
Oh,
I
tell
finally
me.
feel like I've got it.
Honestly, I think it's one of those things. I think we're so conditioned to forget about it and ignore it. And you know a little bit about my history. I burned out very severely 3 times, and that was purely ignoring every cue, every signal. It was one of those people that had to be stopped quite hard and fast. And when
Uh-huh.
I finally gave in and started listening to it, it was amazing, as in how much wisdom it does hold within and how it supports everything else. But because it requires that slowing down, because it requires that being uncomfortable if you haven't
Yeah,
been with yourself for a long time, or if you do have these wounds, I think people would just prefer the quick fixes. Oh
oh,
no,
for
well,
sure.
someone can do it for me, or I'll avoid that. But honestly, it's one of the most beneficial things that you can do. And I think specifically as women, I don't know if this is your experience, but when it comes to the building of the light body, the work that we're here to do, what I find in my work is that men tend to actually be more, I think, more open to embodiment in respect of when you raise it with them, it's a case of, yeah, that actually I can do that. That sounds good. Women, I find, tend to be more resistant to embodiment. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way that we're conditioned by society as women to dislike our bodies, to ignore our bodies, to override our bodies' natural sensations and natural urges and everything that goes on with having a physical form. So I'd love if you don't mind just talking a little bit about your experience working with both men and women as to where you see a lot of challenges and obstacles maybe that people will have to actually truly feeling embodied, because there's a difference between feeling connected to your body and feeling embodied, I believe, certainly in my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because what's coming through for me right now is that the men, when they decide that they want to, then they do, right? Because, yeah, they don't have all this stigma about their bodies, really, for the most part. We're talking generally here, of course. But also, what I find is that embodying is also emotion. It's also about the emotional body. Our bodies are very emotional. And a lot of men have been programmed over years and generations and lifetimes to not show emotion or allow that safety of emotion to flow. And so, yes and no, I see both sides and aspects. For women, we are very emotional. We are very emotional from the beginning, but we do have that programmable stigma of our bodies and overriding our bodies, like you said, like our bodies aren't good enough, or we're not pretty enough, or gravity's starting to take over when I'm 50 and I just don't feel comfortable in my skin, or I've had 12 babies or one baby and it ruined my body and I don't want to go there. And so, yeah, we see all these things. And it does start from way back. I've seen people that come and sit with me, and I'll see the just generational
Mm,
aspects of the feminine where they were just literally, I hate to use this term, but like a toy, right? They were just,
mm,
and so it's hard for a woman to look at her body as important, as
mm,
needed respect, as being seen for what it truly is, which is this beautiful embodied wisdom, right? Every organ, what I've come to understand during this serious, intense embodiment process is that every organ has its own emotion. And we know
mhm,
this, we know that every organ has its own emotions, but it also has its own feelings of its
mm,
own. So it's not just our emotions. I think people tend to think that it's our emotions that we're sticking in our liver or our gallbladder, but really it's also two-level process. The gallbladder
mm,
and the liver have their own emotions on top of your emotions that you also have to discover. And you almost have to think of your holographic body as its own entity with its own mind and its own feelings and its own things it's holding. And once you start to understand that, then you can start to see the other aspects of how to calm it down, of how to work with it, of how to talk with it. And one of the most amazing experiences I've had of a modality was a guided, facilitated microdose psilocybin hypnotherapy appointment. And they're 3 hours long. I didn't really have an intention except how do I work with this body? That was my only intention I went in with. And what I discovered is the trees came in. Now, the trees have been talking to me for a long time, but they said, you have to be the tree. We started off the session with me looking at my feet. First, I was just a light body, and I said, I'm not comfortable. I don't know why I'm not comfortable in my light body like I usually am. And she said, what do you need? I said, I need feet. And so I went feet, and then I was flipping through this book of all the feet that I've had throughout my entire life, soul lifetime. We're talking weird feet, not my feet, weird feet. And then we started from there. But when we went from the feet, it all starts at the feet because all of our nerves end at our feet. And so, when our feet take a lot, there are roots to our body, to our soul.
mm,
So, when we start looking at ourselves as a tree, literally as a tree, how does a tree live throughout its day? It carries wisdom, it has water, it keeps water in its body. Its roots also are rooted in this planet, in its wisdom. Its wisdom far exceeds what you think it does. It's all universal. It holds that wisdom for its entire soul's journey into the roots, into the ground. And then when the wind comes, it just sways with the wind and moves through that process. It alchemizes through its body of its trunk and then puts all of that out into its leaves, which is our hands and our hair and all these in our breath. And it releases this beautiful geometry, which we as
mm,
well do through our vocal cords and our sound and our breath. And it spirals. And when you see the inside of it, you cut it half, it spirals around, but we also spiral. So it's always be the tree, just be the tree.
mm.
So when I forget what I'm going through and I just go outside and I literally just be the tree. I literally pretend and visualize that I am a tree stuck in the ground and I'm just swaying with the wind. But it's been
I
really
love
helpful.
that.
Yeah, and I think it's a good visual for people to understand and put themselves there. If you ignore a tree, it's going to die. So if you ignore yourself, that's going to happen to your body.
Yeah.
So we really have to look at those two aspects because we're no different than each other. Just one is more stable, but they're there to remind us of their stability, how we need to be stable too.
I love that. And it's one of the things that I talk about in my classes when you're channeling, when you're opening up to channel, when you're going into higher dimensions, the very first starting point is how grounded are you? How deep into the earth star chakra, the earth core chakra, how deep can you get down? Because the deeper you can get down, the higher up you can go. You've got control over what you're opening up to and what you're able to receive in. So if you had to prescribe all of the listeners here with one practice, I always say, we'll just say one practice that you think can benefit everybody. We don't want to give people complicated 5-hour morning routines because there's enough of them on the internet. So just one practice that would be a go-to practice for you that has helped you and continues to help you in your daily life. What would that be?
I have two. One is journaling. Just journal. It doesn't have to be every day, but when something comes in your head and you can't make sense of it, but you just want to get it out, journal it. You can always come back to it later. The second is physical, is that I will sit and just relax, and I will actually take my either hand, doesn't matter. I'll just take my finger and just tap gently on my chest, my higher heart center, and take the 4 count breath in and out, hold it in 4 square breath. I would just do that. And then I ask my body after I take about 3 cycles of that, and I tap gently one more time and I just sit and I listen. I listen and I ask, what can I do for you today? And then the very first thing that comes to mind is that you have to trust. And trust has been a really big thing for me ever since, as it is for everybody. It's been a real big journey of trust. Trust what first comes. Now, if you sit there and you think too hard and then start over, gently tap, do the 3 cycles of the 4 count breath, tap again and ask again. And keep doing that till it comes. And then that's how you can trust yourself. And it's that small time just to check in with your heart and your body and your breath. And those 3 things are the most important. And it doesn't take long, less than 5 minutes. Because a lot of
I
people are
love
like, I don't have all day to sit and meditate.
that.
Like less than 5 minutes.
No, I love that because I do think sometimes we can give ourselves such a long laundry list of all of these spiritual things that we're supposed to do. It's actually just taking those little micro moments, I think, throughout the day, especially when you are busy, just to reconnect into the breath, to the body, find out. And then it is, as you say, trusting and acting upon the advice given. Because the more you do that, then the more the advice comes through and the stronger it comes through. And the more you start to trust this beautiful internal technology that we all have and we all have access to. We've just forgotten that we've got access to.
Yeah. And it's just a small exercise to build that relationship with your body.
I love that. Angela, if people are listening to this podcast episode and they are like, I want to do a session with this lady, talk to us about what your sessions are, what your current offerings are. I will, of course, put all of your social media and everything into the show notes so listeners can go over there to find you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. So I have 3 offerings. One is just a check-in that I use if people aren't really sure if they want to do the full one-on-one light golden light session or if they want to do the 3 month path with me. So I offer, plus it's good for people that have a different pay structure. So it's 175 and it's an hour with me just to like move through whatever it needs to move through. It can also just be guidance. It could be the connection, the Sophia connection. It could be just chatting about where they're at, right? So there's that one. But the one that I am here to really embody, that I do embody and I move through with, is the one-on-one golden light session. And that is 105 minutes. And because 6 equals love, so it's 105 minutes for 333. And we move through the whole integration of where you are with your oversoul connection. Sophia comes in and I'm just a conduit. I sit, I listen, we move through together. We're in the mirror field and whatever comes through. So there's not a lot of preparation for it. You just come as you are. We meet you where you are and then what moves through. And sometimes we might get your geometry and your mantra. Sometimes we might get one. It's just wherever you are in your path. And we might do the golden heart, we might do the seed, we might do the light. It just depends on, again, where you are. So that's the one that we do the most of. And then there's a 3 month path, which is just 2 1-hour sessions twice a month for 3 months, which helps you just move through this path. So if you're committed to the oversoul integration, there's enough time between the 3 months to integrate what you learn and try and embody it and work with your homework. And then there's touch points to see where you are, connect with the Sophia stream to move through those aspects. So that's another thing that we offer. And then you can find all of that at loveofone.com.
I love that.
And
Well,
of
thank
course,
you so much. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for your time today, for being a guest of
of
mine, for sharing the wonderful work that you're doing in the world. I think it's something that is greatly needed at this
course.
time, with everybody going through spiritual awakenings, mass awakening periods, new levels of things opening up. I know I'm seeing with my one-to-one clients that new stuff is coming online for people all of the time. They're opening up to new levels of themselves, and it's beautiful to see, but it can be a bit unsettling. So I love that you've got this beautiful, embodied, grounded support for people who are going through that. So thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Of course, thank you. I loved being here. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. I love this conversation.